When people talk about the cost of a luxury electric car, the conversation almost always ends too early. It ends at the purchase price. It ends at tax credits. It ends at the monthly payment. And because it ends there, the decision feels complete. It feels rational. It feels resolved. But clarity at the beginning does not mean accuracy over time. The real cost of a luxury electric car is not revealed in the first year. It reveals itself slowly, once the excitement fades and ownership becomes normal. That is why a 5-year lens matters. Not because 5 years is special, but because 5 years is long enough for every hidden trade-off to surface. This is not a debate about electric versus gas. It is not about technology or ideology. It is about understanding what the decision actually costs once it becomes part of your life, rather than a new purchase. Luxury electric vehicles usually start at a higher price point than comparable gas vehicles. Even when incentives apply, the baseline commitment is often higher. That matters because everything else scales from that number. Financing costs scale. Insurance costs scale. Depreciation exposure scales. A higher starting price does not just affect the moment of purchase. It shapes the entire ownership curve. Small differences at the beginning quietly compound over time. What feels like a manageable premium early can become a meaningful cost when carried for years. Not dramatically, but persistently. And persistence is where real cost lives. Depreciation behaves differently for luxury electric vehicles, not because they are unreliable, but because technology moves faster. Software evolves quickly. Battery expectations change. New models reset benchmarks sooner than most people expect. A 5-year-old luxury electric car can function perfectly and still feel outdated to the market. Not because it failed, but because perception moved on. Resale value reflects market expectations more than owner satisfaction. Depreciation is rarely felt month to month. It shows up later. When you trade in, when you sell, when you finally step back and measure what the decision actually cost beyond the payment. Insurance is another area where expectations and reality often diverge. Luxury electric vehicles are expensive to repair. Even minor damage can involve sensors, cameras, and integrated systems. Parts are specialized. Labor is specialized. Repair timelines can be longer. Insurance pricing reflects this risk steadily. Premiums tend to be higher and stay higher. Over 5 years, this category often surprises owners, not because it spikes, but because it never relaxes. It becomes part of the permanent cost structure. Charging is often framed as a clear advantage, and in many cases, it is. Electricity can be cheaper than gas. Home charging can be convenient, but charging is not free. Home installations may require electrical upgrades. Public charging prices vary widely. Fast charging often carries a premium. There is also a cost that never appears on a receipt. Time, planning routes, waiting during peak hours, adjusting routines around charger availability. For some owners, this is barely noticeable. For others, it accumulates quietly over years. None of this makes electric vehicles a poor choice, but all of it belongs in an honest 5-year evaluation. Maintenance is frequently described as the decisive advantage of electric vehicles. And in many ways, that is true. Fewer moving parts, no oil changes, less routine mechanical service. But luxury EV ownership is not maintenance-free. Software issues occur. Suspension components wear. Tires wear faster in heavier, high-torque vehicles. Out-of-warranty repairs can be expensive because systems are integrated rather than modular. When something fails, It is often part of a larger system. The simplicity narrative is accurate, but incomplete. And incomplete narratives are where surprises live. Now, let's slow this down and walk through a 5-year ownership story. Not a spreadsheet. A story. Imagine someone buys a luxury electric car today. The purchase feels justified. The car is quiet. It is fast. It feels refined. Charging at home feels easy at first. The payment fits. The first year feels great. In year 2, insurance premiums remain higher than expected. Charging routines become normal, but less novel. Public charging costs start to matter on longer trips. In year 3, newer models appear. They charge faster. They go farther. They feel more advanced. Nothing is wrong with the car, but it already feels a step behind. In year 4, tires wear faster than expected. A software issue requires a service visit. Out-of-warranty costs begin to feel real. In year 5, resale value becomes relevant. The car still works, but the market has moved on. The owner now understands the decision differently than they did on day 1. Not because it was bad, but because the full arc is finally visible. Now, zoom out again. Because the most overlooked costs are not financial. They are behavioral. Owning a luxury electric vehicle changes what you get used to. Quiet cabins, instant torque, smooth acceleration, high-end interfaces. Once those become normal, future decisions are shaped by them. The next vehicle is expected to feel similar. Downgrading feels like loss. Upgrading feels justified. This is not poor judgment. It is adaptation. Premium purchases reset baselines, and baselines are expensive to maintain. Another hidden cost is optionality. Large, high-commitment purchases reduce flexibility. They lock future income into past decisions. They make career pivots feel riskier. They make geographic moves harder. They make experimentation more expensive. Not because change is impossible, but because the margin to absorb it is smaller. Over a 5-year window, this matters, because 5 years is rarely static. Careers evolve. Family needs shift. Health changes. Priorities move. Luxury purchases assume stability. Payments and expectations persist, even when life does not. Now compare that to a comparable luxury gas vehicle. The daily experience may be slightly less refined, but the ownership curve is familiar. Refueling is simple. Repair networks are broad. Resale behavior is predictable. Neither choice is wrong, but the trade-off is real. One prioritizes daily enjoyment. The other prioritizes long-term certainty. This is where many people decide too early. They decide at the payment. They decide at the incentive. They decide at the excitement of new technology. But the real cost is not any single factor. It is the entire arc. What you paid. What you lost to depreciation. What you spent insuring and maintaining. What time and attention were required. What flexibility was reduced. And what expectations were reset for future decisions. That is the real 5-year cost. If you can look at that full picture and still feel good about the trade, that is a strong signal. Not that the car is objectively good, but that it fits your life. This channel is not about telling you what to buy. It is about making sure the decision you make is based on reality, not just comfort. Comfort is easy to sell. Clarity takes longer. But clarity lasts longer. This is worth the cost. No advice, no persuasion, just the numbers, the scenarios, and the trade-offs.